up, guys? Got a phone call from a guy who says he has a 6.7 Powerstroke with a fuel leak. I already went and took the wheel well off on the passenger side so I could see most of them fuel lines and injectors. So let's go ahead and check it out. Let's go ahead and start this up, see if I can figure it out. Seems to have lost a little bit of its prime. It took a good second to crank there. Let's walk over here and see if we can figure it out. So, right now, at idle, nothing is leaking. But you can see how the whole ground is wet. It's definitely been losing diesel. So, let me show you what I'm going to do to raise that fuel pressure up a bit on them lines. Let me get this 6x6. Kind of barely push on the gas pedal since I'm the only guy here. I'm going to raise the RPMs about 1,500. See if that makes it leak now. You can see that little bit of smoke around there. That it is indeed leaking now. And look at that back line. You can see where that fuel line is leaking. It's a pretty quick, easy fix. What it is that very back fuel line that looks like it goes to that very back injector has a pinhole in it. And when the fuel is pressurized at a very high pressure, the fuel atomizes and sprays right out that line. Now, if you are new to diesels, let me tell you something. When you are looking for a fuel leak that is a pressurized, high pressure leak, not a low pressure line, such as a line coming from your fuel tank or a return line going back to your tank, never stick your hands around those metal injector lines. They are very high pressure. At idle, I mean, you're looking at 4,000 to 7,000 PSI minimum. A lot of these trucks, they'll reach over 20,000 PSI coming out of your fuel pump, going into your fuel rail while you're driving. That fuel can go eat right through your skin. And just go online and look up the effects of diesel piercing your skin from high pressure like that. You do not want that. So never stick your hands around them lines. But all I'm going to do is go ahead and replace that fuel line, get her nice and tight, and I'll have this guy on his way. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and take this line off. Most diesels have a 17 or a 19 millimeter nut that are on them lines. On this 6.7, both ends of the line happen to be a 17. So thankfully this line here is in a good spot, so I'm just going to use a wrench. Now if you look at some of these lines back in here that go on the injectors, it's impossible to get a wrench up in there because you hit the other lines, there's no room. So if you work on diesels a lot, investing in some of these flare nut line sockets are awesome. This is a snap-on one, it's pretty pricey. Lyle makes some affordable ones, and these are awesome to have. And in all seriousness, on some of these Fords and also Duramaxes, there are a few random lines that are virtually impossible to unscrew without one of these if you're just trying to use a wrench. So if you do these often, you work on diesels a lot, invest in a 17 and a 19, at least at a minimum. So on this back one, it's actually kind of harder than it looks. It looks like it's wide open, but I do need this flare nut socket. So I'm going to go ahead and break it free. I'm just going to break it free a little bit. I don't want my socket to get stuck on there. I got it out of there. Now I should be able to get it by hand or at least by wrench. Still kind of tight by hand. Okay, now you can see this backside is unhooked. Now I just got to get this other side right here. And I could 100% use a wrench the whole time on this one right here. Usually once you break these free, only about a half turn or so. The rest of it is pretty easy to get off, pretty much by hand. So here's that line. It is off, and let's go ahead and install the new one. Right here is a new line. I'm not going to put this one on because the wrong one showed up, unfortunately, but it is the same procedure as removing. Make sure you get the right end on it, or else it's not going to line up, so you can't typically get them backwards. But just make sure you got these guys tight. If you leave them loose, they will leak. Make sure you get them good and snug and they are on there straight. Whenever you line this tip up with your fuel rail or injector, make sure it is sitting on there flush before you start screwing this on, or you can mess the threads up, and you don't want to do that. Then you got big problems you got to deal with. And don't drop them in the floor. That's not good for them either. And that's it. Make sure they're snug. Start it up. Make sure there's no leaks. Sometimes you gotta, depending on what motor you're working on, especially if you ain't got a lift pump, you're gonna have to get the air out of the system. Might take a couple cranks to get it going, but it's all it is.